The bridge of the UNS Vanguard hummed with the low thrum of systems cycling down, a sound Captain Mara Imani had come to associate with fragile pauses in the void. She stood at the central holotable, arms crossed, watching the blue-green marble of Halvoris swell into view on the main viewport. The planet's rings caught the system's distant sun like a faint halo, but there was no poetry in it for her, just another world hanging in the balance, its colonies a patchwork of human ingenuity and alien stubbornness. "Orbital insertion complete, Captain," Lieutenant Reyes reported from the helm, his voice steady but edged with the fatigue of a long haul from the core worlds. "All stations report nominal. We're ghosts up here per the statutes. No emissions beyond passive scans." Mara nodded, her gaze lingering on the tactical overlay. The Concord's pacification edicts were etched into every protocol. No first strikes, no visible deployment of heavy ordnance. The Vanguard's railguns stayed cold, its fighter bays sealed like tombs. Humanity's fleet was here to observe, to deter through presence alone, but presence without teeth felt like a bluff to her, one that could fold at the first real push. She rubbed the scar along her jaw, a memento from a skirmish 2 decades back, before the treaties turned deterrence into doctrine. Elias would call it a reminder of growth. To her, it was a warning that peace had sharp edges. The comms panel chimed, pulling her back. "Incoming secure channel from the Council, ma'am. Counselor Sereth Val." "Patch it through," Mara said, straightening her uniform. The holotable flickered, resolving into the elongated face of the Varelian diplomat. Sereth's skin shimmered like polished obsidian, his multiple eyes blinking in slow unison, a trait that always made Mara feel like she was being dissected. "Captain Imani," Sereth began, his voice a resonant baritone laced with the artificial warmth of translation protocols. "The Galactic Concord welcomes your arrival at Halvoris. As per the pacification statutes of Cycle 47, your role remains observational, peacekeeping through vigilance, not provocation." Mara kept her expression neutral, though irritation coiled in her gut. "Understood, Counselor. The Vanguard is in full compliance. Sensors are active, logs transmitting." Sereth's eyes narrowed fractionally, the only tell of his unease. "Compliance is paramount, Captain. The old treaty clauses, Article 12, Subsection 4, explicitly bind Terran forces from escalatory maneuvers. Humanity's reputation as stabilizers hinges on restraint. Any deviation risks unraveling the very accords that shield this sector." He paused, as if weighing his next words. Mara could almost hear the subtext. "We know your history. We know what lurks behind the smiles. The Aurith Dominion probes our borders, but force begets force. Your presence alone will suffice as deterrent." The channel cut with a soft click, leaving the bridge in heavy silence. Reyes glanced her way, but Mara waved him off. Sereth's words weren't new. They'd been hammered into every briefing since the expedition launched. But hearing them now, with Halvoris's fragile outposts blinking like fireflies below, they landed like lead. "Bridge out," she said quietly, turning toward the corridor. "Maintain station. Elias, meet me in the briefing room." Her brother was already there when she arrived, hunched over a datapad with that boyish focus that made him seem younger than his 28 years. Elias looked up, his dark eyes mirroring hers but softer, unscarred. "Heard the broadcast? Sereth's playing the long game again. Remind everyone we're on a leash." Mara slid into the seat across from him, the room's dim lighting casting shadows that deepened the lines on her face. "Leash or no, we're here. Dr. Joe, join us." Leon Jo entered moments later, her tablet clutched like a shield. The xenopsychologist's hair was pulled back in a practical knot, her expression a mask of clinical calm that Mara knew hid deeper currents. Leon had been with the expedition from the start, her insights on alien psyches a lifeline in negotiations, but lately Mara sensed the weight of old ghosts in her silences. "Border incidents first," Leon said, activating the holotable. A star map bloomed, red icons pulsing along the Halvoris corridor. Orath scouts have hit 3 outposts in the last cycle. Nothing overt, just probes. They hit a mining relay yesterday. Minimal damage, but they left graffiti in their script. Translation mocks us as harmless petitioners, begging for scraps at the Concord's table. Elias leaned forward, tracing a finger over the display. Petitioners? That's their propaganda line, painting us as weak to justify pushing in. I've seen the feeds. Keth Ra's warlords are eating it up. They think our restraint is fear, not choice. Mara's jaw tightened. The Orath were predators by culture. Their dominion built on conquests that left scorched husks in their wake. Keth Ra, their warlord, embodied it. Cunning, brutal, always testing edges. And the civilians? Leon's voice softened, a rare crack. Evacuations are underway, but the probes are psychological too. They're not just scouting defenses, they're herding people, seeing how we react. Concord inspectors on the ground are demanding drawdowns, citing the statutes. Ariath Val's report just came in. The table shifted to a planetary feed. Ariath's face materializing in grainy real time. The field governor looked harried, her aristocratic features echoes of her father's, strained by dust-streaked fatigue. Behind her, the command center on Halvoris buzzed with aides and flickering alerts. Captain Imani, Ariath said, her voice cutting through static. Incursions escalated at dawn. Orath skiffs hit the outer settlements, took 3 engineers, left the habdomes cracked open like eggshells. They're probing, not committing, but civilians are fracturing. Families are barricading, demanding we arm up. Mara leaned in. Status of defenses. Minimal per council orders. Inspectors pulled our heavy gear 2 days ago to avoid provocation. My people are using what they can. Barricades, signal jammers. But if they push the core colony... Ariath's eyes hardened. They're testing you, Captain, the humans. If we fold, Halvoris folds. The feed ended abruptly, leaving a hollow echo. Elias exhaled sharply. She's right. This isn't random, it's a dare. Leon nodded, her fingers drumming the table. Orath psychology thrives on perceived weakness. Keth's playing to his coalition. Show them the Concord's pets won't bite. Mara stood, pacing the narrow confines of the room. The weight of it pressed in. Sareth's edicts, Ariath's plea, the ghosts of worlds her fleet had watched burn from afar. She believed in the doctrine, peace through overwhelming potential, not endless war, but potential meant readiness, and readiness meant lines crossed. Private channel to engineering, she said, voice low. Elias, you're with me. In the dim glow of the auxiliary bay, away from prying sensors, Mara watched her brother interface with the calibration rig. The air smelled of ozone and recycled oxygen. The hum of dormant systems, a constant undercurrent. Covert drills only, she instructed, her words measured. Disperse the calibration signals across non-military bands. Make it look like routine maintenance. Weapons hot in simulation mode, no live fire. Fighters on cold start, pilots briefed for shadow runs. Elias glanced up, his hands pausing on the console. This skirts the statutes, Mara. Sareth's clauses, I know the clauses, she cut in, sharper than intended. Guilt flickered. Elias idolized the ideal, saw humanity's restraint as proof of evolution. She placed a hand on his shoulder. We're not striking first, we're ensuring we can if we must. The or else behind the piece. He nodded slowly, resuming the work, but doubt lingered in his eyes. Mara turned away, staring at the bulkhead as if it held answers. Her flaw, she knew. Overestimating words, underplaying the fire in her veins. But Halvoris wasn't a debate. It was a tripwire. Hours blurred into the ship's rhythm, the drills unfolding in shadows, engineers tweaking yields in hidden alcoves, pilots running neural sims without launching. Mara monitored from her ready room, the tactical feed a web of ghosts, systems primed, but invisible. The alert came mid-watch, a priority ping from fleet intel. Mara's console lit up with Sareth's seal, but it wasn't a direct hail, a formal dispatch. Censure motion filed. Unauthorized maneuvers detected in Terran vessel UNS Vanguard. Council review pending. Commander Imani to stand by for inquiry. Her stomach dropped. How? The channels were encrypted, the signatures masked. But Sereth's network was vast, his Varelian spies woven into every relay. He'd caught the whisper of it, calibrations bleeding through some overlooked filter, and now the political knife was out and twisting against her command. Reyes's voice crackled over the intercom. Captain, incoming from the outer system. Multiple contacts, Orath signatures massing at the jump point, skiffs and corvettes, at least a dozen. They're not hiding. Mara's mind raced, the pieces slamming together. Sereth's motion would tie her hands further, broadcast her vulnerability. Elias burst into the room, face pale. They're staging, Mara. Keth's calling the bluff. Far across the void, in the shadowed war chamber of the Orath dreadnought Iron Fang, Keth Ra paced before his council. The air reeked of incense and oiled metal, holographic projections of Halvorus flickering like prey in the dim light. His warlords, hulking figures in scarred armor, watched him with predatory anticipation, their mandibles clicking in approval. The humans orbit like statues, Keth growled, his voice a rasp honed by battlefields. He slammed a fist into the table, the display rippling. Sereth's leash holds them. Our probes show it, cowering behind edicts, petitioners, and ships of steel. A subordinate, eyes gleaming with ambition, leaned forward. Then we strike the outers, burn a settlement, take thralls, force their hand, or prove it empty. Keth's laughter was low, devoid of mirth. Arrogance was his armor, but old tales gnawed at him. Human wars that glassed stars, retaliations that left empires ash. He shoved the doubt down. History bent to the bold. Brazen, yes. Raid the rim at dusk, skiffs in, fast and bloody. Test if the peace lovers bear teeth. If they do, we adapt. If not, Halvorus is the gateway. The council roared assent. But Keth's gaze lingered on the human icons, a flicker of unease buried deep. Back on the Vanguard, Mara stood at the viewport, the massing Orath signatures a swarm on the edge of her display. The censure loomed like a noose, Elias's worried glance a weight on her shoulder. Leon entered quietly, her voice steady. Council's watching every move now. One violation and we're grounded, literally. Mara's hand tightened on the console. Obey and watch the raid unfold. Settlements cracking under Orath blades. Violate and shatter the fragile mask. Reveal the or else that kept the stars in line. Her brother's life, humanity's name, Ariath's world, all balanced on this edge. The first skiff signatures accelerated, inbound. Time. The bridge of the TNS Vanguard hummed with the low thrum of passive sensors. A sterile vigil that Captain Mara Imani had come to despise. She stood at the central holotable, arms crossed, her dark eyes fixed on the flickering feeds from Halvorus's outer rim. The planet's dusty mining towns, Eldridge and Voss, were specks of human-alien grit on the edge of conquered space, places where workers scraped iridium from the regolith to fuel the galaxy's endless diplomacy. Now they burned. Orath strike groups had dropped from the void like predators scenting blood. Skiffs punched through the thin atmosphere, their plasma lances carving red-hot scars across the settlements. Local militia, a ragtag mix of Halvorian guards and off-world contractors, fired back with shoulder-mounted railguns, but it was futile. The feeds captured it all in brutal clarity, a militiaman in scarred envirosuit, crumpling as shrapnel tore through his visor, civilians scrambling for bunkers, only to be herded into kill zones by Orath shock troops. Screams filtered through the audio pickups, distorted but human enough to twist in Mara's gut. Passive surveillance holding, Captain, Lieutenant Reyes reported from Tactical, his voice steady but edged with the strain of watching without acting. No emissions from our arrays, we're ghosts to them. Mara nodded curtly, her jaw tight. The Concord's mandates were ironclad. Observe, report, deter through presence alone. Humanity's expeditionary fleet, the so-called peacekeepers, wasn't here to fight, not unless the Council waved the flag. And they wouldn't. not for remote assets like these towns. She could almost hear Sereth Val's lecturing tone in her head. Escalation begets escalation, but as another feed showed an Orath hover tank pulverizing a militia barricade, the words rang hollow. Down in the engineering bays, Elias Imani hunched over a bank of monitors, his fingers flying across the interface. The live streams from Halvoris flooded his screens, unfiltered, raw. A woman clutched a child, pleading into a comms relay. "Vanguard, please, they're everywhere. We need evac." Static swallowed her words as an Orath drone strafed the position. Elias's stomach churned. He was no soldier, just a combat engineer with a knack for alien tech. But this was the kind of failure that made him question everything. He slammed his fist on the console, the feeds jittering. Naivety be damned. He'd signed on to prove humanity had evolved, that their restraint was strength, not cowardice. But watching butchers carve up innocents under a peace banner, that wasn't evolution, it was complicity. He bolted from his station, boots echoing down the corridor toward the ethics officer's office. The door hissed open before he could knock. Dr. Leon Zhou looked up from her datapad, her sharp features framed by the glow of legal tomes scrolling across her screen. She was mid-40s with the quiet intensity of someone who'd seen too many briefings turn into body counts. "Elias, I can guess why you're here. What the hell is this?" He jabbed a finger at the wall-mounted display, where the Eldridge feed played on loop, a militiaman dragging a wounded comrade while Orath fire chewed the ground around them. "We're just sitting here? The Council's pacification statutes. There's got to be a clause for genocide in progress." Leon leaned back, her expression a mask of controlled regret. She gestured him to a chair, but he stayed standing, fists clenched. "Sit, Elias. Shouting won't change the law." When he didn't, she sighed and pulled up a holographic charter, the Concord's emblem pulsing like a judgmental eye. "The statutes were designed to prevent exactly what you're fearing, human escalation. The Orath read our past like a war manual. Total mobilization, scorched orbits. They hit these towns because they think we'll blink, intervene offensively, and we prove them right. The Council expels us, isolates soul. Earth becomes a pariah, and every protectorate we swore to shield turns into a free-for-all." Elias paced, his idealistic fire cracking under the weight. "So we let them burn? For optics? Mara's out there, my sister. She's supposed to lead, not watch." Leon's eyes softened, but her voice stayed firm. "I'm briefing the captain now. The justification is deterrence through restraint. But if she moves without sanction—" She trailed off, the implication hanging. Mara would pay the price. Elias stormed out, the door sealing behind him with a finality that echoed his doubt. Mara's comms chimed as Leon entered the bridge observation lounge, datapad in hand. The captain turned from the viewport, where Halvoris loomed like a bruised marble against the stars. "Doctor, your thoughts on the feeds?" Leon synced her device to the holotable, overlaying legal overlays on the carnage. "The Orath are testing boundaries, Captain. Surgical strikes on low-value targets. Message received. The humans won't bite. The statutes bind us to surveillance only. Any kinetic response risks council sanction, expulsion, isolation." She met Mara's gaze, her own haunted by ghosts of neutral worlds she'd documented in reports, worlds where humanity's hands stayed clean and millions died anyway. "We can't afford to become the monsters they expect." Mara's fingers drummed the table's edge, her mind racing through contingencies. She believed in the doctrine, peace through the shadow of strength. But this felt like surrender. Her brother was aboard, green as they came, chasing dreams of a galaxy that didn't devour the weak, and Earth, the fragile web of alliances that kept her home safe. Understood, but we can't just observe. Extraction protocols, non-lethal support. "Get me options." Planetside, on Halvoris's fractured plains, Governor Ariath Val crouched in the command bunker of Voss's outer perimeter. Alarms wailed as Orath skiffs screamed overhead, their shadow bombs cratering the Earth. Dust choked the air, and the acrid tang of ionized rock burned her throat. She was Sereth's daughter, bred for diplomacy, but governing this corridor world had scarred her with realities her father debated in sterile chambers. "Shields at 40%, her aide shouted, a burly Halvorian with plasma burns across his arm. The Colonial Guard, 50 souls, human and alien, huddled behind prefab barricades, their pulse rifles spitting defiant fire. Orath troops advanced in echelon, their chitinous exosuits shrugging off hits like rain. Ariath gripped her comms, voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. "All units fall back to the human shield grids. Link up with the mining core's emitters, full integration." Gasps rippled through the line. Council directives forbade it. No mingling human tech with conquered assets in active combat. It blurred lines, invited accusations of escalation, but as an Orath lance vaporized a guard post, sending screams across the net, ideology crumbled. Her world was bleeding. Her father's politics wouldn't staunch it. "Move! That's an order." The retreat was chaos, runners weaving through dust devils, dragging wounded while drones harried their flanks. Ariath covered the rear, her sidearm barking at shadows. Resentment boiled, expendable, that's what she was to the Council, but she'd be damned if she'd die undefended. Back on the Vanguard, Mara finalized the op in the tactical pit. Reyes and her XO flanking her. "Unarmed shuttles only," she said, tracing extraction corridors on the hollow. "Barricade drones for cover, non-lethal fields, smoke screens, no weapons hot. Pull civilians to the grids Ariath's holding, in and out, ghosts." Reyes nodded, inputting the launch codes. "Risky, ma'am. Orath anti-air's thick, but it'll buy time." The shuttles detached with muffled thuds, streaking toward the atmosphere like silver needles. Mara watched the telemetry, her pulse steady but her mind a storm. This was the edge, human ingenuity threading the needle of restraint. But if it failed, the cost would be hers. Aboard the Orath Command Dreadnought, Shadowfang, Warlord Keth Ra leaned over the tactical nexus, his scaled lips curling in satisfaction. The chamber reeked of ozone and blood oaths. His officers clustered around flickering orbs, showing the Halvoris assault. Reports scrolled, militia shattered, towns aflame, and the human ships inert. "Passive scans only," his second growled, mandibles clicking. "No pursuit vectors. The peace lovers bare their teeth but do not bite." Keth's eyes gleamed, arrogance a warm coil in his chest. He'd built the Dominion on this calculus: strike where mercy showed, erode the conquered's facade. Humanity's tales of total war were myths, bluster to hide their softness. "Toothless," he rumbled, slamming a fist on the console. "Prepare the hammer." Voss and Eldridge were probes. The capital falls next. Full assault. Let them watch their ideals bleed out. His fear lingered unvoiced. What if the old stories held truth? But arrogance drowned it. History favored the bold. In the Council's orbital spire, a glittering web of crystal and resolve, Councillor Sereth Val strode the emergency chamber, his robes whispering against the polished floor. Long-lived and aristocratic, he carried the weight of centuries in his deliberate steps. The news of Mara's extractions had hit like a plasma burst, unauthorized, provocative. His daughter planetside, holding the line against his own doctrines. Fear for Ariath gnawed at him, but he buried it under philosophy. Strength corrupted always. "Esteemed members," he intoned, projecting the feeds of shuttles darting through Orath fire. "Captain Imani's actions skirt the statutes. Extraction without sanction invites escalation. We must convene immediately, strip her autonomy before the Orath force our hand." Murmurs rippled. Some nodded, others shifted uneasily. Sereth's resentment toward humanity burned. Their unspoken threat undermined true harmony. Yet in quiet moments he dreaded the snap. As the session adjourned to vote, his comms buzzed. Ariath's voice strained. "Father, we're holding, but they won't stop." He silenced it, steeling himself. Peace demanded sacrifice, even his own blood. Mara's bridge alerts blared as the extraction feeds stabilized. shuttles ferrying clusters of soot-streaked survivors to the shield grids, drones weaving barriers of force and fog. Casualties mounted, 2 birds down, Orath fire grazing a third, but they'd pulled hundreds clear, a fragile win, bought with inches of legality. Then Reyes spun from his station, face ashen. Captain, incoming intercept. Fleet intel just decrypted Orath bursts. Full-scale assault vectoring on Halvoris Prime. Bombardment wings. Ground legions. ETA 12 hours. Mara's blood ran cold. The capital, 500,000 souls. The corridor's heart. Her rules of engagement, passive, extractive, were paper shields against that storm. The council moved to leash her. Orath emboldened and time bled away. She met Leon's eyes across the bridge, the weight of choice settling like regolith dust. Restraint had limits, and hers was breaking. Mara's gaze lingered on the holographic star map flickering above the bridge console, the red icons of Orath scout probes pulsing like wounds in the void. Halvoris hung there, a blue-green jewel in the corridor, oblivious to the noose tightening around it. Her fingers tightened on the armrest of her command chair, the leather creaking under her grip. The council's emergency session was already underway, broadcast from the neutral spires of Conquered Prime. She could picture the chamber, tiered rings of delegates, their alien forms shrouded in robes and exoskeletons, the air thick with the hum of translators and the faint ozone of overworked emitters. Sereth Val's voice cut through the feed first, smooth as polished obsidian, laced with that aristocratic lilt that always set Mara's teeth on edge. Esteemed members, the Terran peacekeeping expedition's recent maneuvers, deploying shield arrays without council sanction, represent not defense, but brinkmanship. Captain Imani's actions flirt with the shadows of humanity's past. We all recall the Terran wars, scorched fleets, shattered worlds. To indulge this now invites those ancient fears back into our midst. Mara exhaled slowly, her pulse steadying as she watched the HoloLink request bloom on her personal display. The bridge crew moved like ghosts around her. Elias hunched over a diagnostics panel, his face pale under the blue glow, while Leon Joe stood at her elbow, arms crossed, eyes sharp. The order came. Testify. Now. Mara nodded to the comms officer, and her image materialized in the chamber, projected life-size amid the delegates. She straightened, her uniform crisp despite the hours since the last alert. Counselors, my deployment was calibrated to the statutes. Protectorate integrity without escalation. The Orath probes were testing our resolve. Shield arrays deter without firing a shot. That's the doctrine you've all endorsed. A murmur rippled through the feed, fragmented by translations. Sereth leaned forward, his elongated features creasing in what might have been concern or calculation. His species aged like ancient trees, bark like skin etched with centuries of diplomacy. Deterrence, Captain, or provocation. Your arrays encroach on neutral space. The Orath claim violation. You claim necessity. This cycle breeds only suspicion. Mara chose her words like munitions. Each one weighted. She couldn't speak of the dormant arsenals buried in her fleet's cores, the relativistic kill vehicles, the cascade warheads that humanity had sealed away after the last great purge, the or else that kept the stars quiet. Suspicion thrives where threats go unanswered, Counselor. Halvoris is a Concord ward. If we fold now, what message do we send? The chamber quieted, eyes, compound, slit, multifaceted, fixed on her. Sereth's gaze bored in, unyielding. The message of restraint, Captain. Humanity's gift to the galaxy, peace without the fist. Push further and you unravel it. Testimony dragged, a verbal minefield. Mara defended each log entry, each sensor ping, threading the needle between compliance and the raw truth of Orath aggression. Sweat beaded at her temple, but she kept her voice level, a veteran's mask. When the session recessed, the bridge exhaled with her. Elias glanced up, his dark eyes mirroring her fatigue. They're boxing you in, sis. Sereth's playing you like a relic. Not yet, she muttered, but the doubt gnawed. Leon pulled her aside as the crew dispersed to stations. activating an encrypted partition that sealed them in a bubble of white noise. The xenopsychologist's face was drawn, her black hair pulled tight, accentuating the lines of old regrets. Mara, they're scared of your shadow more than the Orath. Use it. Humanity's reputation isn't a curse, it's a lever. Hint at the old stories, the total wars. Not a threat, just a reminder. What happens when the leash snaps? Mara's jaw tightened. Leon's advice skirted the edge, rationalizing the unspoken as preventive therapy, as she'd called it once over stim-laced coffee. But Halvoris burned in Mara's mind. The mixed colonies, Ariath Val's people scrambling under raid sirens. Veiled, you mean? No doctrine, no specifics. Exactly. Let their imaginations fill the void. Sereth wants purity? Show him the cost of it. The session reconvened, the chamber's lights dimming as Mara reappeared. Sereth yielded the floor with a flourish, but his eyes never left her. She waited for the probe, and it came from a avian delegate, feathers ruffling. Captain, your defiance risks escalation. Why not withdraw? Mara leaned into the hololink, her voice dropping to that low timbre she'd honed in boardrooms turned war councils. Withdrawal leaves worlds like Halvoris exposed. And if they fall, if 500,000 souls vaporize under Orath guns, what then? Humanity has walked away from fires before, watched them consume everything. But when we choose to stand... She paused, letting the silence stretch, the weight of unspoken histories settling. The galaxy remembers what follows, not as mercy, but as the storm that reshapes orbits. I urge you, don't force us to remind you. Gasps echoed, fragmented across species. A cephalopod counselor recoiled, tentacles coiling. Others shifted, whispers buzzing. Sereth's face hardened, his bark skin paling to ash. Cautionary tales, Captain. This borders on coercion. History, counselor, earned through blood we no longer spill unless compelled. Mara held his stare until the feed cut, her heart pounding against her ribs. The backlash hit like shrapnel. Sereth moved for sanctions, restricted fleet ops, mandatory council oversight on every move. Votes tallied in her favor by a thread, fear of Orath tipping the scale, but the leash tightened. As the session dissolved, Mara slumped back, Elias at her side, his hand brief on her shoulder. You rattled them. Good. Not enough, she said, voice rough. Leon nodded grimly, but the victory tasted like ash. Far across the void, in the jagged spires of Orath Command on their Forge World bastion, Keth Ra pored over the leaked transcripts. His ally in the conquered fringes, a disgruntled trade envoy, had funneled the data through shadow channels, untraceable bursts. Keth's chamber reeked of heated metal and stim vapor, walls lined with tactical hollows of the corridor. He was broad-shouldered, scaled hide scarred from a dozen border skirmishes, his yellow eyes narrowing as he replayed Mara's words. Veiled threats, he growled to his aides, a cluster of sub-commanders in spiked armor. The humans posture, but the council clips their wings. Sereth's statutes hold. No escalation, no fangs. One aide, a wiry female with fresh burns from a raid gone sour, tapped the display. They hint at old wars, Warlord, the total purges. Keth laughed, a rasp like grinding gears. Stories to scare kits. If they had teeth, they'd bear them by now. Sereth's defanged them, restraint as chains. He straightened, claws clicking on the console. Arrogance burned in him, the thrill of history bending to the bold. Mercy was weakness. He'd carved empires on that truth. Commit the main fleet, decapitation strike on Halvoris capital. Take the governor, shatter the heart. The humans watch, leashed. The corridor opens. Orders flew, dreadnoughts powering cores, swarms of corvettes slipping from docks. Keth watched the armada muster, a tide of black hulls against the stars. Fear flickered, buried deep, the old tales of human firestorms that glassed fleets whole. But no, not anymore. The conquered had tamed them. On Halvoris, the capital's dome shield hummed under perpetual storm clouds. Ariath Val paced her governor's tower. The world was a patchwork. Human agridomes nestled against alien spires, the air thick with the scent of rain-soaked earth and fusion exhaust. Intercepts flooded her console, Orath chatter, raw and unfiltered, courtesy of a human listening post she'd bullied into overdrive. "The capital," she whispered, replaying the burst. "Primary target, decapitation." Her hands shook as she keyed the personal line to her father, bypassing protocols. Sareth's face materialized, stern even in hologram, the council's chambers still echoing behind him. "Father," Arieth said, her voice cracking the poise she'd built over years of border governance. Pragmatism warred with resentment. She'd seen the raids, the charred husks of outposts, while his statutes tied hands. "Orath traffic confirms it. They're coming for the city, full fleet. I need authority to call in human support, real support, not probes and prayers. Violate your own rules if you must." Sareth's eyes, deep-set and weary, flickered. Ideology clashed with the gut punch of paternal fear. His only daughter, worlds away, in the crosshairs. "Arieth, the statutes exist for a reason. Human intervention. It unravels everything. The council's just bound them tighter." "Bound us to death!" She slammed a fist on the desk, the tower's alarms wailing faintly in the background as civilian drills kicked in. "500,000 here, Father. Mixed blood. Your ideals in flesh. Give me the order." He hesitated, mouth opening then closing, the weight of centuries pressing. I'll consult. Hold position. Evacuate non-essentials." The link died stalling, a diplomat's evasion. Arieth cursed, turning to her staff. Human aides, alien liaisons, barking orders for bunkers and shield boosts. Exposure yawned before them, the fleet's delay, a death sentence. Back on the flagship, Mara's console chimed, classified, eyes only from Terran intel nets. She sealed the bridge, Elias and Leon flanking her as the decrypt unfolded. Orath Armada signatures massing for jump. Halvoris, capital strike, ETA 48 hours. Proof in vectors and emissions, cold as vacuum. Her blood chilled anew, the pieces locking. Orath betting on paralysis, council dithering, her warnings ignored. Restraint's limit stared back, a fracture line. Elias leaned in, voice low. "They're all in. Sareth's stall. It's feeding them." Leon nodded, her ethics officer's calm cracking. "The ORLs, Mara. It's time to draft it." Alone in her ready room, door sealed. Mara pulled up the contingency template, illegal, buried in her personal core. Fingers flew over the keys, outlining the breach. Reveal the doctrine, unseal the arsenals, the cascade that turned peace to ash. Not a shot yet, but the promise. If Halvoris burned, the galaxy would know the cost of mistaking quiet for surrender. Her hand hovered over commit, the weight like regolith in her lungs. Brother's face flashed, idealistic, trusting. Her own reflection stared back, scarred by choices yet unmade. The draft saved, encrypted deep, limits broke not with fanfare but in silence, and hers had. Mara Imani stood on the bridge of the TEP Vanguard, her hands clasped behind her back, eyes fixed on the main holoscreen as the stars warped into focus. The Orath fleet had punched through the translation point like a fist through paper, their massive dreadnoughts and swarms of corvettes blotting out the sensor net's frantic pings. Alarms wailed in staccato bursts, but she silenced them with a sharp gesture to her tactical officer. No need for panic. They'd drilled for this shadow play 100 times in Sims, always under the Council's blind eye. "Captain," Lieutenant Reyes said from her station, voice steady but edged with the grind of fatigue. "They're already vectoring on the orbital platforms, lead elements firing, disruptor barrages inbound." Mara nodded, her jaw tight. The platforms were conquered assets, thinly armed for defensive patrols only, per the statutes Sareth Val had rammed through last cycle. She watched the feeds, crimson lances of Orath energy weapons, slicing toward the skeletal habitats, where mixed crews, human, Valeri, even a few Orath defectors, scrambled for cover. Keth Ra's voice boomed over open channels, a guttural translation feed laced with synthetic mockery. "Peace-loving humans," he snarled, his image flickering into view on secondary screens. a hulking figure in spiked armor, eyes gleaming with predatory glee. You hide behind your words while we claim what's ours. Watch your fragile nets shatter. Mercy is for the dead. The first platform erupted in a bloom of debris, venting atmosphere and bodies into the void. Mara felt the recoil in her gut, a familiar twist from campaigns long buried. Her fleet hung back, research vessels and supply haulers masquerading as the bulk of human presence per orders. No escalation, no preemptive strikes, just observe and report while the Orath carved their path to Halvorus below. From the Council's remote feed, patched through encrypted relays, she caught glimpses of the chambers, Sereth Val at the podium, his elongated Valari frame rigid, scales shimmering under the harsh lights. He was mid-debate, gesturing at holographic charts of proportional response protocols, his voice a measured drone. Partial visuals showed the invasion unfolding in real time on side monitors, but he didn't pause. No emergency session call, no directive to Mara beyond the standing orders. Contain, de-escalate, adhere to the pacification edicts. His daughter was down there, Ariath governing the colony, but politics trumped blood, it seemed. Mara clenched her fists, nails biting into palms. The old man's freeze left her hands tied, or so he thought. Enough. The contingency was hers, buried in the Vanguard's core code, activated by a single override phrase whispered to the AI. Initiate protocol echo, she said quietly, her voice cutting through the bridge hum. The ship shuddered subtly as hidden compartments unsealed. Across the fleet, research vessels, slender probes and survey craft began rearming in silence. Suppressed railgun modules slid into firing positions, fusion warheads arming in bays disguised as sensor arrays. Civilian cover be damned. The Concord laws forbade it all, but Keth's fleet was already committing genocide by inches. Mara watched the status icons flip green, hidden defense satellites prepositioned under mining outpost guises powering up. They'd been her insurance, seeded over months of diplomatic surveys. Now they formed a web around Halvorus orbit, invisible until triggered. Elias, she said into her comm, patching to her brother's position on the auxiliary engineering deck. Status on the arrays. His face appeared in her helmet overlay, sweat-slicked and young, framed by the glow of control panels. He was mid-maneuver, his shuttle weaving through a convoy of civilian evacuees, transports bloated with families from the outer stations, engines flaring against the encroaching Orath shadows. Mara, I'm linking the primaries now, but these shuttles, they're sitting ducks. Orath pickets are closing. I've got to prioritize the arrays, she cut in, hating the steel in her tone. Elias was no soldier, just a engineer with stars in his eyes, chasing alien wonders. But the arrays were the backbone. Dormant orbital killsats, slaved to the fleet's fire control. Without them, the Orath would glass the capital unopposed. Get them hot, Elias. The convoys got partial shields. They'll hold for the fallback zones. He hesitated, eyes flicking to his scopes. A shuttle in the lead convoy took a grazing hit, hull breaching with a silent flash. Screams echoed faintly over the open band, cut short. They're dying out here, sis. I can buy them time. And lose the system? Do it. The words tasted like ash. Elias nodded grimly, severing the link to divert power. His shuttle peeled away, engines burning hot toward the array cluster, leaving the convoy to fend for itself. Mara tracked it on her display. 3 transports made it to the inner lanes before the Orath closed the noose. She didn't watch the end. Down on Halvorus, the ground feeds painted a chaos of dust and fire. Ariath Val's voice crackled over the command net, calm but laced with the grit of someone who'd stared down raiders before. All units fall back to the human shield zones. Burn the flags, every exposed facility. Make it clear, this is on you now, Keth. Mara pulled up the visual. Colonial outposts, conquered banners aflame in courtyards, ground forces retreating in armored convoys toward the human enclaves. The shield zones were Terran tech, dome generators that could weather orbital barrages, but they weren't infinite. Ariath's move was a gauntlet thrown, shifting the blame, attacked the mixed sites, and it was just conquered squabbling, hit the human zones, and the galaxy saw it for what it was. War on Earth's children. Smart, ruthless. Sereth's daughter had teeth her father lacked. The Oreth pressed on regardless. Keth's flagship, a behemoth called the Iron Maw, led the spearhead, its sub-commanders' protests filtering through intercepted chatter. Warlord, sensors glitch, possible anomalies in the debris field, one growled, voice thick with unease. Shadows and ghosts, Keth barked back, his laughter a rumble. The humans bleat and retreat, as always. Their restraint is legend. They'll fire warning shots, nothing more. Push to the capital, break their spine. Mara's bridge crew exchanged glances, the air thick with held breath. The Oreth formation tightened, dreadnoughts forming a wedge toward the planetary arc, corvettes screening for threats. Her satellites were live now, ghosts in the machine, rail accelerators charging with a whine that vibrated through the Vanguard's deck. Elias's icon blinked, arrays synced 80%. Captain, Rhea said, Oreth ETA to optimal firing arc, 2 minutes. They're ignoring the civilian lanes entirely. Mara's mind raced, weighing the fracture point. One salvo, that's all it would take, a single, precise unleashing to shatter their advance. The Council would howl, Sereth most of all, but Keth's mockery still echoed, a taunt to the peace humanity had armored itself to preserve. Her brother was out there, exposed. The colony below, burning, limits had broken in silence. Now came the thunder. Target the spearhead, she ordered, voice level as plasteel. Full spread from the arrays, fire on my mark. The holoscreen bloomed with targeting overlays, satellites aligning like unseen archers. Elias's voice broke through. Arrays green, Mara, but the convoy, half gone. Mark, she said, cutting him off. The void lit up without sound. But the sensors screamed it, rails accelerating slugs to a fraction of light speed, fusion-tipped lances erupting from the civilian ships. The Oreth spearhead, 8 dreadnoughts, their escorts, vanished in a chain of detonations. Hulls crumpled inward, reactors breaching in white-hot fury, debris fields expanding like blood in water. An entire flank of Keth's invasion force, gone in seconds. The galaxy's feeds caught it all. Open broadcasts from the Oreth, conquered relays, even pirate streams. Humanity's hidden fangs bared for the first time since the old wars. Keth's voice cut through the static, raw shock, replacing bravado. What sorcery? Fall back, regroup. Mara watched the remnants scatter, her fleet holding position, weapons cooling. The bridge fell silent, Reyes's eyes wide, a faint tremor in her hands on the console. Elias's shuttle icon stabilized, linking back in. It's done, he whispered, but God, the cost. She didn't answer, staring at the wreckage. Deterrence achieved, but the hook sank deeper. Stop here and Keth might slink away, licking wounds, testing again tomorrow. Press and the surrender would be total, but at what price to the mask humanity wore? Sereth's chambers would erupt. Arieth's world hung by the thread of this revelation. Her choice loomed, heavy as the void, as the first Concord inquiry pinged inbound. Peace through strength, or the strength that birthed endless war? The stars waited, unblinking. The bridge of the TFS Vanguard hummed with the low thrum of cooling systems, the air thick with the scent of overheated circuits and recycled oxygen. Captain Mara Imani stood at the central holotable, her fingers tracing the flickering edges of the debris field where the Oreth spearhead had been. Mere hours ago, a bristling armada of gunships and boarding craft, now twisted metal blooming like dark flowers against the stars. Her crew moved around her in controlled silence, faces etched with the fatigue of a battle won too narrowly, their eyes avoiding hers as if sensing the storm still brewing in her chest. The first casualty reports had trickled in from Halvoris just before the strike. Villages razed not by plasma fire, but by deliberate blades and broadcasts of screams. Keth Ra's response to the spearhead's annihilation, swift, vicious, a warlord's tantrum disguised as strategy. Mara had watched the feeds herself, the grainy hollows of bound colonists, human and alien alike, throats slit in ritual defiance. their blood pooling on cracked earth, while Orath officers narrated the justice of it all. It had twisted something in her gut, a reminder that peace wasn't just fragile. It was a dam holding back floods of this. "Captain," Lieutenant Reyes said from her station, voice steady but laced with urgency. "Incoming transmission from the Orath command net. It's fragmented, looks like internal chatter." Mara nodded, pulling up the intercept on her personal display. The audio crackled with alien gutturals, the Orath tongue a rasp of dominance and fracture. She didn't need the translation overlay to catch the panic threading through it. The subsonics alone screamed disarray. Far across the void, aboard the ironclad bulk of the Orath dreadnought Blood Oath, Warlord Keth Ra's command chamber reeked of scorched bulkheads and the metallic tang of spilled coolant. The holoscreens flickered erratically, projecting the ghosts of his shattered vanguard, sensor ghosts of vaporized hulls, silent accusations from officers who'd pledged their clans to his banner. His council huddled around the central dais, 5 sub-commanders, each a hulking figure in scarred armor, their mandibled faces twisted in a mix of fury and doubt. "The humans turned our thrust to ash," growled Varric, the fleet tactician, his claws scraping the table as he jabbed at the replay of the ambush. "One coordinated salvo from their flanks. How? We had scouts out 3 light minutes." Keth paced, his armored boots thudding against the deck, the wound from an earlier skirmish a shallow gash across his thigh, throbbing with each step. Arrogance had been his armor, but now it chafed like ill-fitted plate. He'd banked on human hesitation, on the Concord's leash holding them back. Instead, they'd struck like vipers, precise and unforgiving. "They feinted weakness," he snarled, his voice a low rumble that silenced the chamber. "But weakness doesn't scatter fleets. We adapt. Hit them where it bleeds." He activated the broadcast array, his council exchanging uneasy glances. Hostages on Halvoris, settlers from the fringe colonies ripe for the spectacle. "Execute the captives in the eastern holds. Beam it to every frequency. Imani's peace is a lie built on our blood. Let her watch her ideals choke." Varric hesitated, his multifaceted eyes narrowing. "Warlord, this invites escalation. The old tales—" Keth whirled, slamming a fist into the table, cracking the alloy. "Tales are for the conquered. We force her hand, back down, or drown in our resolve." The orders went out, and as the first screams echoed back through the comms, Keth felt the fracture deepen in his ranks. Defiance, yes, but laced with the fear that perhaps the humans' restraint had been the true weapon all along. Back on the Vanguard, the execution feeds hit Mara's console like a gut punch. She froze, the hollows unfolding in brutal clarity. A line of prisoners on a dusty plaza, Orath enforcers moving with mechanical efficiency, the wet snap of blades followed by slumped forms. A child's cry cut short, then silence broken only by the warlord's voiceover taunting the galaxy. "See the cost of your meddling, Imani. Yield or Halvoris weeps eternal." Her hands clenched, knuckles whitening. The bridge crew watched her, waiting for the word that would tip them into the abyss. Before she could speak, the door hissed open and Dr. Leon Joe strode in, her tablet clutched like a shield, face pale but eyes burning with the fire of someone who'd seen too many reports like this. "Mara," Leon said, voice low to keep it from the crew, but sharp enough to cut. She thrust the tablet forward, casualty tallies scrolling in red. 200 confirmed dead in the last hour. Projections climbing to thousands if the raids continued. That limited demo we pulled off. It's done nothing but enrage him. Keth's doubling down. Executions to break our will. We can't dance around this anymore. Authorize the strike on their command ships. Decapitate the head. Flagships, relays, the works. It'll cost them heavy. Tens of thousands if they don't scatter, but it'll end this before Halvoris is a graveyard. Mara met her gaze, the weight of it pressing down. Leon's words carried the echo of old ghosts. Worlds Mara knew she'd referenced in hushed tones, places where neutrality had meant watching from orbit as species blinked out. But this? A decisive blow meant crossing lines the conquered had drawn in adamantium. And the fallout. Sereth's statutes bind us to proportionality, Leon. One wrong move, and we're the monsters they fear. Leon's jaw tightened, her flaw surfacing in the subtle tremor of her hand. The rationalizers itched to bend ethics into necessity. Proportionality died with those hostages. This is preventive. Save lives now or justify more blood later. You're the one who taught me strength isn't aggression. It's the will to protect what's fragile. The argument hung, unresolved, as another ping echoed. Elias, her brother, bursting onto the bridge from the engineering bays below. His uniform was smudged with grease, eyes wide and haunted, the idealistic spark dimmed by what he'd just done. Activating the ambush arrays had been his call, his hands on the controls that turned Orath metal to slag. Now the executions played on auxiliary screens, and he looked like he might be sick. "Mara, stop this," Elias pleaded, voice cracking as he grabbed her arm, ignoring protocol. The crew averted eyes, but the tension coiled tighter. "I saw the feeds. Those people, they were bargaining chips, not soldiers. If we go full strike, we're proving every legend right. Humans as the devourers of stars. Call for ceasefire, negotiate, Keth's fracturing. We can talk him down before—" "Talk?" Leon snapped, whirling on him. "While he slits throats on live broadcast? Your naivety's going to get more like that child killed, Elias." He flinched but held Mara's gaze, his fear raw, the dread that she'd become the ruthless specter their history warned against, dragging him with her. "You're better than this. We are. Peace isn't just deterrence. It's choosing not to become them." Mara pulled away gently, her mind a whirlwind. Elias's words clawed at her overestimation of words over steel, but Leon's urgency mirrored the screams still echoing in her ears. The bridge fell silent as a new transmission overrode the channels, a direct beam from Halvoris, stamped with Governor Ariath Val's seal. In the besieged command center of Halvoris Prime, Ariath Val gripped the edge of her console, the room shaking from distant explosions. Smoke curled from a breached wall, and her aides huddled over flickering maps, faces streaked with soot. Outside, the sky burned with Orath drop pods, but it was the internal feeds that broke her. Her citizens, her people, human traders bartering with Val kin, now dragged into the open and dispatched like vermin. One execution showed a family she'd hosted just weeks ago, their pleas cut short. Enough. Her father's doctrines had left them exposed, a pawn in his grand moral theater. With trembling fingers, she keyed the galactic broadcast, routing it through every conquered relay. "This is Governor Ariath Val of Halvoris. To the Council, your pacification laws are a death sentence. Orath butchers my world while you debate restraint. I demand emergency authorization for Captain Imani to dismantle their fleet total without your chains. Refuse, and Halvoris declares exclusive human protection. We will not die for your ideals." The transmission cut, and Ariath slumped, resentment boiling into resolve. Her fear that she'd become expendable in Sereth's game faded against the immediate, survival at any cost. On the vanguard, the ultimatum blared across the bridge, Elias paling further while Leon nodded grim approval. Mara's comms lit up next, Sereth Val himself, his aristocratic features haggard on the split screen, the opulent backdrop of his council chambers a stark contrast to the chaos. "Captain Imani," Sereth began, voice measured but strained, his long-lived poise cracking at the edges. He'd watched Ariath's words like a blade to the throat, his daughter's pragmatism exposing the rot in his philosophy. Restraint had been his creed, a bulwark against the coercive shadows he saw in humanity's past. But now, with her world bleeding, doubt gnawed. What if his fear of their strength had blinded him to necessity? "I authorize a proportional response," he said finally, the words tasting like surrender. "Target aggressors directly, minimize collateral, preserve the high ground for all our sakes." Privately, as the link closed, he accepted it. His doctrines had failed her. The Concord's moral facade teetered, and perhaps only the humans, or else, could shore it up. Mara stared at the blank screen, the narrow leash chafing. Proportional. It would drag this out, invite more executions, more graves. Her flaw whispered, diplomacy first, but the war-scarred core of her, honed from campaigns where hesitation cost lives, rebelled. Elias watched her, pleading silently. Leon waited, expectant. "No," Mara said, voice steel. She turned to Reyes. "Helm, plot coordinates for Orath flagships, Keth's blood oath, and her sisters. Engineering, prime the lances for decapitation. Command bridges, C2 nodes. Leave the flanks open. Retreat vectors clear for the rest. We end the head, not the body." Elias stepped forward, horror etching his face. "Mara, Sereth's order is a bandage on a severed limb," she cut in, meeting his eyes with scarred resolve. "We protect peace by making war too costly to wage, not by becoming butchers, by being inevitable." The orders rippled out, the vanguard surging with her escorts, sleek human corvettes weaving through the fleet like needles through cloth. Tactics unfolded with gritty precision, feints to draw Orath pickets, then the hammer, railguns and plasma lances slicing through void shields, targeting the nerve centers. No chest-thumping cheers, just the cold camaraderie of survivors sinking breaths under fire, human ingenuity turning odds into inevitability. Aboard the Blood Oath, alarms wailed as the first hits landed. Keth braced in the command throne, the deck bucking as a lance pierced the bridge armor. Shards of console exploded and Varric slumped, lifeless, across the table. "Evasive!" Keth roared, but it was futile. The humans. The chamber hummed with the low thrum of holographic emitters, their blue glow casting long shadows across the curved benches of the Concord Tribunal. Captain Mara Imani stood at the central dais, her uniform crisp, but her shoulders heavy under the weight of recycled air and unyielding stares. The air recyclers whispered like distant artillery, a reminder that even here, in the heart of the Galactic Concord's neutral station, nothing was truly still. Her hands rested flat on the cool alloy rail, fingers tracing faint scars from a boarding action years back, scars that itched now, as if sensing the scrutiny. Counselor Sereth Val presided from the elevated podium, his elongated frame draped in the flowing robes of his species, iridescent scales catching the light like oil on water, his eyes multifaceted and unblinking, fixed on Mara with a mix of accusation and something sharper, more personal. The tribunal was closed. No public feeds, no alien press drones buzzing for spectacle, just the 5 council members, their aides, and the witnesses arrayed in alcoves. Sereth's voice cut through the hum, measured and resonant, carrying the weight of centuries. "Captain Imani, your actions at Halvoris represent a grave breach of the pacification statutes," he intoned, gesturing to the floating holodisplay that replayed grainy footage. Orath ships crumpling under precise lance strikes, debris fields blooming like blood flowers in the void. "You exceeded your mandate as a peacekeeping observer. Human forces under your command did not merely deter, they annihilated an aggressor fleet. This was not restraint, it was retribution." Mara met his gaze, her jaw tight. She could see the flicker in his posture, the subtle dilation of his throat frills. He knew. Arieth's dispatches from the surface had painted the picture, raiders torching outposts, her daughter's colony teetering on evacuation. Sereth credited her in private channels, a grudging nod buried in legal briefs, but here he played the prosecutor. Saving his bloodline didn't buy absolution. "The Orath under Keth Ra weren't raiding for sport, Counselor," Mara replied, her voice steady, honed from too many briefings under fire. "They targeted Halvoris because they thought we'd fold. My fleet ensured they learned otherwise." Sereth leaned forward, his claws tapping the podium in a rhythm that echoed old debates. "And in doing so, you undermined the very foundation of conquered law. Peace through example, not through the shadow of your guns." He paused, the holodisplay shifting to casualty tallies, Orath dead outnumbering conquered losses 10-1. "Yet your intervention spared the colony. Governor Val's world stands because of it." The words hung, laced with the unspoken. His daughter lived because Mara had pulled the trigger. The other counselors shifted, their alien forms a mosaic of unease. Tentacled advisors from the Vexari cluster, murmuring through gill vents. A crystalline delegate from Epsilon pulsing faint warnings. Mara felt the room's gravity pull toward her, the center of this fragile orbit. When her turn came, Mara didn't flinch. She straightened, ignoring the ache in her neck from hours of testimony prep. I won't deny the strategy, counselor. Humanity offers peace freely, always has, but it's enforced. Catastrophic retaliation isn't a threat. It's the promise behind every handshake. You mistook our restraint for weakness. Halvorus was the correction. Gasps rippled through the chamber, soft but seismic. Sereth's frills flared, a rare tell of shock. The holodisplay glitched, overlaying Mara's words with archival footage. Ancient human wars, grainy vids of orbital bombardments that had scarred worlds before the Concord era. Peace-loving, they'd called her species in the statutes, a naive label that ignored the deterrence hidden in every expeditionary hull. One counselor, a squat, furred representative from the Grom worlds, leaned into his calm. This changes the readings of intent. If deterrence requires such escalation. Mara pressed on, her voice low but carrying like a rifle crack. We ended the Orath push without glassing their core worlds. That's mercy. But ignore the or else, and worlds like Halvorus burn. She saw it land, Sereth's eyes narrowing, not in anger, but recognition. The council had built their laws on a fiction, and she'd just shattered the frame. Dr. Leon Joe took the stand next, her steps measured across the chamber floor. The xenopsychologist's face was drawn, lines etched deeper since the battlefeeds had come in. Mara watched from the dais, a knot twisting in her gut. Leon had argued for the escalation in those final hours, her ethics brief laced with warnings about Orath trauma responses. Now she faced the fallout. Trauma on Halvorus proves it, Leon said, her voice clear over the emitters. The Orath read our non-intervention as invitation. Deterrence without credible threat is an illusion, a predator's green light. She glanced at Mara, a flicker of solidarity in her eyes, then turned to Sereth. I advised the captain on escalation protocols. The fault is mine. Censure me if you must. But her actions aligned with preventing greater loss. The chamber stirred. Leon's career hung by this, ethics officer to disgraced advisor, her promise to never watch another genocide from afar, now a shield for Mara. Sereth's claws stilled. You accept responsibility for subverting the statutes. I do, Leon replied, unflinching, because the alternative was silence, and silence let Kethra's ships close on the colony. Mara's throat tightened. Leon's sacrifice bought breathing room, but it carved deeper into the human delegation's standing. No one walked away clean. Elias was last among the witnesses, his engineer's jumpsuit swapped for formal grays that hung loose on his frame. Mara caught his eye as he approached the alcove, her brother, eyes shadowed from nights poring over array schematics. The battle had stripped his idealism raw. He'd seen the Orath bridge explode from his station, Varric's body crumpling amid the shards. No more dreams of pure diplomacy. I armed the defense arrays, Elias stated, voice rough but steady. Under Captain Imani's orders, I believed in the Concord's path once, thought we could bridge cultures without the old shadows. He paused, glancing at Mara, loyalty burning through the disillusion. But Halvorus showed me, restraint without teeth invites the blade. I stand by her choice. Burn my future if it means protecting what's left. Sereth's frills quivered. Elias's admission sealed it, no denying the human hand in the retaliation. The counselors conferred in low bursts, their alien tongues a murmur of consequence. Mara felt a surge of pride laced with sorrow. Her brother had crossed the line with her, trading his hopes for this scarred solidarity. The session broke for deliberation, the chamber emptying to sterile corridors. Mara lingered, Leon at her side, Elias trailing like a shadow. You didn't have to, Mara murmured to them both, the words heavy in the quiet. Leon shook her head. Had to, for Halvorus, for the next one. Elias nodded, his hand brushing her arm. "We're in it now, sis. No going back." Word came via secure link. Ariath Val had moved in the aftermath. From the colony's governor's hall on Halvoris, she'd rallied the mixed council, human settlers, alien refugees, and forged the Halvoris Defense Charter, joint protection, human assets embedded under conquered oversight, a bulwark against future raids. It was a victory, security etched into treaty ink. But Mara saw the erosion in the fine print. The council's pacifist purity cracked, concessions to human-style garrisons signaling that ideals bent under fire. Sereth reconvened the tribunal hours later, the chamber thicker with tension. His verdict echoed off the walls. Captain Imani's actions were unlawful under current statutes, exceeding mandate, deploying force beyond deterrence. He paused, eyes on Mara. Yet strategically justified. The threat to Halvoris demanded response. Command is stripped. Enforced retirement pending review. Mara exhaled, the weight shifting but not lifting. Stripped but not broken. The councilors voted, a ripple of assents, and Sereth added the codicil. New defense statutes will incorporate an or-else clause, deterrence formalized, with provisions for retaliatory measures when peace is directly threatened. Human doctrine integrated under oversight. It was legitimized, the shadow given form. No more illusions. Mara felt the galaxy tilt, the Concord's laws now bearing humanity's imprint, peace that remembered the cost. Days blurred into transit. The Endeavor, Mara's former flagship, loomed in the docking bay, its hull scarred from the Halvoris fray. She walked the gangway one last time, Elias at her elbow, Leon trailing with a data slate of transfer orders. Crew lined the corridors, salutes crisp but eyes heavy, camaraderie forged in the void, now frayed by politics. "Captain," a young ensign said, voice cracking, "the array's held because of you." Mara nodded, throat tight. "Because of all of us." She clasped Elias's shoulder. "Look after them." "And yourself." He gripped her hand, fierce. "We'll hold the line, the real one." As the shuttle detached, Mara watched the Endeavor recede, a speck against the station's sprawl. In the forward cabin, a feed flickered to life. New captains, fresh faces from the human contingent, reviewing protocols on their bridges. Revised statutes scrolled, pre-positioned weapons caches near flashpoints, deterrence arrays tuned for rapid response. Quiet authorizations, the or-else woven into the fabric. The galaxy watched, uneasy. Someone, somewhere, would test it again, mistake peace-loving for harmless. Mara leaned back, the stars streaking past, wondering what fire would light next. The cost was etched in her bones, but the peace endured sharper for it.